So the question as posed is a very difficult one to answer with regard to why and how the evaluation is done. This is an evaluation of setback and radiant heat and the function of there. So we know that there's a significant loss or a significant increase in the heat insult that's going to be experienced by a structure in this type. So with that, it is the structure that we are looking at that is proposed as the new structure. It does not take into account the homes around, and it is because we actually do have not the 10-foot setback with the additional space that's provided by the setback that's required on the additional property. So 10 feet is actually one of those very important zones. And when it comes to the components that were listed, we have the Chapter 7A and the 5-foot combustible zones. This provides hardening and defensible space. We have two additional elements that harden the exterior shell of the structure to resist the insult from radiant heat, the exterior sprinklers, and the 1-hour rating for the exterior walls. So what this is going to do is this is going to assist in the primary component of making sure that structure is not being infiltrated by either embers that are being blown at high velocity winds or some kind of radiant heat or direct flame impingement. The combination of these characteristics of the structure, hardening, and defensible space work as a system. They're designed to do that, and they are recognized by IBHS, CAL FIRE in forensic studies, where they look at events like Palisades and Eaton. They did find that for those components that were combined, they did have an increased survivability rate, and those things are taken into consideration. The cumulative effect of these multiple mitigation strategies is expected to provide the same practical effect in these scenarios and mitigate against the radiant heat that they may encounter from the structure and structure ignition. No further or other mitigations or changes to this project have ever been evaluated, and they were not part of this evaluation. And I will add that from a structural component or an operational component, these buildings actually have, they're large buildings. They have a potential, they have those things that have been built in. We try to make sure that any building that's constructed, the goal is to keep a fire that starts in an area, keep it in that area, that
contained,
origin,
right? Yes.
Keep it in the room of origin, and then the shell of origin, and then for WUI to make sure it doesn't get out into the environment. From the outside in is also a component. These hardening and defensible space combined efforts will provide greater safety for this particular structure, and including the, I'd say the force multiplier of the sprinkler system. So the sprinklers that are on the exteriors are going to do one additional thing that's an active, it's an active component of suppression that is not actually present in most projects. So it is one of those things that actually really does raise the bar for this particular project.
Let's go to water, and I think this is great. I think you've done a good job explaining this, and I think you also showed this during the hardening presentation that you presented some time back. In the Code of California Regulations 14 CCR Section 1270.01, it defines the same practical effect as a package of 5 mandatory components: emergency access, safe civilian evacuation, signage, available and accessible water, and fuel modification. Your memo went deep into 3 of these, but for water, your memo defers hydrant design specifications to the building permit phase, if I remember. And for signage, the memo is silent. Can you explain the reasoning behind your decision to approve the same practical effect SPE finding without addressing 2 of the 5 other mandatory categories? Was that just an oversight, something you're going to get to later, or you can determine that those categories don't require analysis for that particular support?
It was not an oversight. It was actually not in scope for this evaluation. The exception or the exception request specifically cites the part of the code that it is attempting to, it recognizes that it needs a mitigation for. That is the full scope of the evaluation for the exception request. Everything else was evaluated. We do have the water, the levels of the potential water fire flow. We have all of that stuff that was actually part of the evaluation. And when it comes down to it, I would say that if you want further detail or anything that isn't contained in what I just said, or Chief Fox can help.
No, this is great. I don't want to take up too much time. I have like 3 more questions. One is really on evacuation, and that's reconciling some information we have. Your memo states that department determined that this project provides for safe civilian evacuation. The city's own Fair and Peer study shows that Foothill Boulevard has a volume to capacity ratio of 4.0, which is high, and Stevens Creek Boulevard at 3.6 during a wildfire scenario. This is 3 to 4 times the overcapacity before adding 51 more units and potentially 100 to 150 people to a single access peninsula. Can you walk the council through how you reconciled your determination with that data? Did you review the Fair and Peer study? And if your determination was based on the developer-prepared evacuation study referenced in the February 10th agenda item? I know that's a lot.
No, absolutely not. So what we had, we evaluate what's in 4290 for the site, as I stated earlier. So with that, the evacuation is for those people that live in that site. The topic of evacuation, so Santa Clara County Fire acts as a subject matter expert for the city and for staff, and we've been working in that capacity for quite a long time, and we will continue to do so. So when it comes to public safety needs or other related fire response, we're here, and this is what we do. This was out of scope for this particular evaluation. And
so evacuation routes were out of scope in this evaluation, just
correct.
To be clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
okay. All right. And then the next question is Government Code Section 65913.4A, Section 6D, which AB 130 incorporates, allows a project in this very high fire hazard zone to proceed only if it has adapted fire hazard mitigation measures pursuant to existing building standards or state fire mitigation measures under, and the statute says, all of the following. PRC 4291, PRC 4290, and Chapter 7A. The word is all, not part, if that's correct. The Fire Department's own approval for PRC 4290 is titled Application for Use of Alternate Materials, Methods of Construction, or Modification of Code. That is an exception from PRC 4290's 30-foot setback and not compliant with it. Can we explain to the council how modification of the code constitutes adoption of measures pursuant to the code as the statute requires? Because if the project has not adopted the measures pursuant to all 3 standards, the legal basis for the AB 130 exemption appears to be missing.
Okay, great, thank you. The exemption from CEQA, not in scope for us. We actually were reviewing in accordance with 4290. In 4290, the definition first with same practical effect is used in the subchapter to mean the exceptions or alternative of the capability of applying accepted wildland fire suppression strategies and tactics, provisions for firefighter safety, which include access for emergency wildland equipment, safe civilian evacuation, signage that avoids delays in emergency equipment response, available and accessible water supply to effectively attack wildfire or defend a structure from wildfire, or fuel modification sufficient for civilian and firefighter safety. All of those things are in scope under that definition. With that, with regard to exceptions to standards, the exceptions to the standards in section 127007 exceptions, upon request by the applicant, the exception to the standard with this subchapter may be allowed by the inspecting entity in accordance with Title 14, Section 127006, where the exception provided the same practical effect and these regulations towards providing defensible space. So the request in section B of that request that the exception be made in writing to the local jurisdiction, and that the applicant or their authorized representative. So we did receive that. The setback request was specifically outlining the setback. The setback was for the parcel, and the 30-foot is the standard, and that's the starting point. So all parcels shall provide a minimum of 30-foot setback for all buildings from property lines and or the center of the road, except as provided in subchapter B. So absolutely no challenge to the fact that 30 feet is the starting point.
Vice Mayor?
The reduction in the minimum setback
excuse
shall be
me.
based upon the practical reasons.
Excuse me, can
Yes.
you put what the document you are reading on the slide projector? Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
That
That's
way
even better. Pop that up.
The public can see because it's a very long paragraph. I
Very
think
good.
I know how to find it, but it will help the public.
Thank you. Yeah, so with that, this effectively will tell us that, or this informs us to how and what we should be evaluating and the scope of which we should. This is the objective standard that has been provided through 4290, the non-combustible block walls,
So I get
the non-combustible
4290. I get 4290, but 4291 isn't in there. So let me pull this all together here. So I've got everyone here, and I know it's a lot of technical jargon and legalese and policy for everyone out here, but there's apparently 3 things we have to answer. We've got 2 out of 3. So let's bring this full circle. You've explained how the department and yourself evaluated the proposed proposal, weighted the mitigations, determined that a 5-foot zone was okay, reconciled competing types of evacuation data, and decided that SPE, same practical effect components, required analysis. And every one of those steps involved your professional judgment, and that is entirely appropriate, and we trust you there. But that is what we expect from our fire professionals. But AB 130 provides a CEQA exemption only for projects that are ministerial, which the city applies objective standards without exercising personal judgment. 14 CCR 1276.01 sets an objective standard 30 feet. The proposed project has 10 feet. Your own plan review labels that a deficiency. So my question, and this is for the city attorney as well, is this, and well, was the fire department's same practical effect, SPE finding, a ministerial act or discretionary one? And if it was ministerial, then no real safety evaluation occurred and the neighbors should be concerned. And if it was discretionary, which the record of this evening's testimony might demonstrate, then this project has a discretionary component and it is not eligible for an AB 130 CEQA exemption. I'd like an answer from our city attorney and from the fire department.